Look, I need you to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you because this is going to sound absolutely insane until you realize it's happening to you too. Yesterday, I was completely certain that the bakery on my corner was blue. I've walked past it hundreds of times. That shade of blue was burned into my consciousness. Today, it's green. And not just green. It's always been green. I asked 3 neighbors. All of them looked at me like I was crazy and confirmed. It's always been green. But I have mental photographs of that blue building, vivid as anything I've ever remembered. That's when I knew something fundamental had shifted in my reality. If you've ever felt like people around you changed their minds overnight about something they always believed, if you remember conversations that nobody else remembers, if objects in your house seem to be in places you would never put them, you're not losing your mind. You're not having memory problems. What's actually happening is you're navigating between converging realities, and the frequency of your consciousness is shifting between parallel timelines. This isn't metaphor, this isn't spiritual poetry. This is what's literally occurring, and there's quantum physics to back it up. Here's what I'm going to do for you in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening to your reality right now, why your life feels like it's vibrating between different versions of itself, and most importantly, what you can do about it in practical, actionable ways. Not as some abstract spiritual concept, but as a literal description of what quantum mechanics has already confirmed. Your consciousness isn't bound to one timeline, and once you understand how to navigate this, everything changes. Let me tell you how I discovered this. For 3 solid months, I genuinely thought I had some kind of neurological disorder. I was experiencing conflicting memories, this overwhelming sensation of, I've lived this before but it was different, relationships that seemed to have parallel histories that didn't quite match what I remembered. I was terrified. I started researching brain conditions, wondering if I needed to see a doctor. Then I stumbled onto quantum physics papers about consciousness and parallel realities, and suddenly everything clicked into place. What I was experiencing had a name, timeline convergence, and it had an explanation rooted in actual physics. Here's the simplest way I can explain this. Forget everything you were taught about time being a straight line from past to future. That's not how reality actually works. Time is more like an ocean of nows happening simultaneously. You're not moving through time like a car on a highway. You're jumping between different versions of now, different parallel realities where choices unfolded differently. Hugh Everett proved this mathematically back in 1957 with his many worlds interpretation. Every decision, every choice, every possibility creates a branch, and all those branches exist at once. What you're feeling is your consciousness becoming aware of multiple branches simultaneously. And here's why this is happening to you right now, specifically in this moment of your life. We're in a collective shift, where the fabric between these timelines is thinner than it's ever been. The barriers are dissolving. Your consciousness is expanding beyond the illusion of one fixed reality, and that expansion is letting you perceive what's always been there, the quantum field of infinite possibilities. You're not broken, you're waking up. And that changes absolutely everything about how you navigate your existence from this point forward. You know what's wild? You've been feeling it for a while now, haven't you? That nagging sensation that something's off. Not wrong, just different. Maybe you chalked it up to stress or lack of sleep, but deep down your consciousness knows better. There's a reason you're here, reading this, and it's not random. Your frequency is shifting, and reality itself is responding to that shift in ways most people never notice. Let me tell you about the first sign, dissonancia de memoria social. It's when you remember shared events completely differently from everyone else. And I'm not talking about forgetting someone's birthday. I mean central facts, core details that should be carved in stone. Here's what happened to me. My mom swore we took a family trip in 2018, absolutely certain about it. I was equally sure it was 2019. When we finally found the photos, 2020, neither of us was even close, and that's when the quantum reality of multiple timelines started revealing itself to me. The second sign hits even stranger, perception of lag or glitch. You'll be walking down a familiar street, turn your head, And there's this fraction of a second where everything seems to freeze, like reality's buffering. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Your brain is literally synchronizing with a new version of the scenario, updating the consciousness interface between you and the quantum field. I've had moments where I blinked and the entire room felt like it needed half a second to catch up with me. Then there's the third sign that'll make you question everything. People suddenly acting strange. Not because they changed, but because you might have jumped to a timeline where they've always been this way. Your best friend who was always punctual is suddenly chronically late, or your partner develops habits you swear weren't there before. The frequency of their behavior pattern doesn't match your memory because you're accessing data from a parallel line where their choices unfolded differently. It's not Mandela effect. It's consciousness navigating converging realities. The fourth sign is the one that really messes with people: impossible intuition. You know things you have absolutely no way of knowing, like when I knew my friend would call exactly 10 seconds before my phone rang. Not a hunch, not a guess. Physical certainty flooding through my body. That's your consciousness tapping into adjacent timelines, pulling information from quantum possibilities that are bleeding through. And the fifth sign? That bone-deep exhaustion after seemingly normal days. Your energy is being split across multiple realities simultaneously, processing parallel versions of your existence. Your body's paying the metabolic cost of multidimensional awareness. But here's where it gets really interesting. Understanding these signs is just scratching the surface. What's coming next will show you the actual physics behind why this isn't madness. It's mathematics. Look, I get it. Everything I just described sounds absolutely insane if you think about it through the lens of classical physics. But here's the thing. We're not living in Newton's universe anymore, and your consciousness sure as hell isn't following those old rules. What you're experiencing has been mathematically proven by some of the brightest minds in quantum mechanics. Roger Penrose, Nobel Prize winner, proposed something that'll blow your mind. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality. It literally creates reality through the collapse of the wave function. You're not watching the movie of your life. You're directing it in real time. And the quantum field is your camera. Let me break down superposition for you in a way that'll make this click. In quantum physics, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed, right? Now apply that to consciousness itself. Every possible version of you, the one who became a doctor, the one who moved to another country, the one who made completely opposite decisions, all of them exist right now in different branches of the multiverse. Hugh Everett proved this mathematically decades ago. When timelines converge, you don't just think about these other versions. You consciously perceive the leakage between them, like frequency bleed on an old radio. Here's where it gets even wilder, and this one kept me up for weeks when I first understood it. Penrose also demonstrated something deeply unsettling: retrocausality. Future events can influence the past, so when you remember something that never happened in this timeline, you're not going crazy. You're accessing the past of an adjacent reality that's converging with yours right now. The memory is real, just not from this particular branch. I once had a vivid memory of a conversation with my father that he had zero recollection of. 2 years later, we had that exact conversation, word for word. My consciousness had pulled data from a future probability that eventually collapsed into my present. Think of it like this. Imagine two rivers running parallel to each other, so close that in some places the water from one splashes into the other. You're not in one river or the other. You're in the spray zone where both realities are touching. That splash is what you're feeling when you experience those 5 signs. Your consciousness is fluid enough to detect when multiple timelines are running so close together that their frequencies overlap. Most people's awareness is too rigid, too locked into the illusion of linear time to notice. But you're sensing the quantum foam underneath the surface of reality. The beautiful part about understanding this physics is realizing it's not supernatural. It's hypernatural. This is how consciousness actually works when it's not being compressed into the tiny box of materialist thinking. Every meditation tradition, every mystic, every shaman throughout history was describing this same phenomenon using different language. They called it enlightenment, awakening, or cosmic consciousness. We're just calling it by its scientific name now, quantum navigation through parallel timelines. And once you know the mechanics, you can start driving instead of just being a passenger. But understanding the physics is only half the equation. What really matters is what this does to your sense of identity, your ego, your entire concept of who you think you are. And that's where things get beautifully chaotic. Here's where most people hit a wall. And honestly, it's the most terrifying part of this entire journey. Your ego, that voice in your head that's been telling you this is who I am your whole life, was built on one massive lie. That there's one fixed past, one stable present, and one linear future. When you start perceiving multiple timelines, your ego doesn't just get confused, it goes into full-blown panic mode. Because suddenly, all those stories you've been telling yourself about your identity, your history, your personality, they're just one version out of infinite possibilities. The foundation cracks and you feel like you're losing your mind. I'll never forget my own crisis around this. I spent 3 days crying, literally unable to function, because I was leaking between different versions of myself. One moment I'd feel like the person who made certain choices. The next I'd viscerally feel like someone who'd lived a completely different life. My past felt unstable, like trying to stand on water. But after those 3 days, something shifted. I realized I wasn't losing who I was. I was discovering I'd never been just one thing to begin with. And that realization? That's not a crisis. That's absolute power. Because if you're not locked into one identity, you can consciously choose which frequency of yourself you want to embody. Let's talk about something painful that suddenly makes perfect sense through this lens. People leaving your life. You've probably had relationships, friendships, romantic partners, even family, where people just drifted away. No big fight, no dramatic ending. They just became incompatible with you. That's not rejection, that's physics. You literally shifted to a timeline where your frequency and theirs no longer match. They're still existing in their reality, you're existing in yours, and the consciousness bridge between you dissolved because you're vibrating at different rates now. It's not personal, it's quantum mechanics. Here's the part that'll set you free if you really let it sink in. If the past isn't fixed, then regret is a complete illusion. Every wrong decision you made created a branch where it was necessary, where it taught you something, where it led to a version of you that needed that exact experience. You're not trapped by anything you did or didn't do. That job you didn't take? There's a timeline where you took it and learned those lessons. That relationship you ended? There's a version of you still in it, experiencing that reality. You contain multitudes, and every choice was right in the context of the timeline it created. The ego wants to make you small, contained, predictable. It wants one story, one path, one identity it can defend and protect. But consciousness doesn't work that way. You're not a single thread. You're the entire tapestry. And once you stop fighting that, once you stop trying to be consistent with some imaginary fixed version of yourself, you become fluid. You can shift, adapt, and navigate between different expressions of who you are based on which timeline serves your highest evolution. That's not instability, that's mastery. Now you might be wondering, if all these timelines exist simultaneously, when and how do they actually touch? When are those moments where you can consciously feel the convergence happening? Stay with me, because what's coming will give you the exact map of when these quantum windows open. So you're probably asking yourself, when exactly do these timelines get close enough for me to actually do something about it? Well, here's the thing. Convergence isn't random. There are specific moments when the barriers between realities become thin, almost transparent, and your consciousness has heightened access to jump between them. These are natural windows, the transition between sleep and waking, deep meditative states, moments of intense emotional crisis and high-stakes decisions. In those moments, the quantum field is incredibly receptive to your intention, and you can consciously navigate which timeline you're collapsing into. Let me tell you about the night that changed everything for me. I was stuck in a soul-crushing job. Every day felt like dying slowly. One night, In that strange state between sleeping and waking, you know, that twilight zone where you're not quite here or there. I felt the timelines. I can't explain it any other way. They were like radio frequencies, and I could sense them humming around me. I intentionally tuned into one where I'd already left that job, where I was free. The feeling was so real, so visceral, that my body relaxed for the first time in months. The very next morning, completely out of nowhere, I got a call from a company I'd never even applied to. 3 weeks later, my entire life had shifted. New job, new reality, new frequency. Here's something you've definitely experienced but never understood. Déjà vu. You know that eerie feeling when you swear you've lived a moment before? That's not a glitch in your brain's memory system. It's your consciousness recognizing a convergence point where multiple timelines intersect. It's literally a map lighting up, showing you, hey, you're at a quantum crossroads right now. When you feel déjà vu, stop and pay attention. That's the universe handing you a navigation tool. You're standing at an intersection where you can shift which reality you're heading toward. And then there are synchronicities, those coincidences that are just too perfect to be random. When you're aligned with a new timeline, reality confirms it with these breadcrumbs. You think of someone and they text you. You need information and a book falls off a shelf with exactly what you needed. This isn't mystical woo-woo. This is an observable effect of quantum coherence between your consciousness and the timeline you're collapsing into. The more aligned you are, the more the external world reflects that frequency back to you. It's physics, not magic. Though honestly, at this level, they're the same thing. The key is recognizing these windows when they appear. Most people go through life asleep, missing every single convergence point because they're too busy, too distracted, too locked into autopilot. But now that you know what to look for, those liminal states, those moments of déjà vu, those impossible synchronicities, you can be present when the timelines touch. You can be intentional. You can choose. And that's when the real power kicks in. But knowing when the windows open is one thing. Actually navigating through them, that requires a protocol, a step-by-step process that keeps you grounded while you're shifting between realities. And that's exactly what I'm about to hand you. All right, let's get into the actual mechanics, the step-by-step process you can use starting today to navigate timelines consciously instead of drifting randomly between them. First thing you need to understand, before you can navigate anywhere, you have to anchor yourself in the observer. Not the person, not the personality, not your name or your history, pure consciousness. The person is just a character playing out a role in one timeline. Consciousness is what's watching all the timelines simultaneously. Spend 5 minutes every day just observing your thoughts without identifying with them. Don't fight them, don't engage, just watch. That's your anchor point, and without it, you'll get lost in the quantum field. Phase 2 is mapping your current frequency with brutal honesty. Grab a notebook and write down exactly where you are right now. Your relationships, your dominant emotions, your financial situation, your health, everything. No judgment, no story, just raw data. This isn't about feeling bad or good about where you are, it's about getting crystal clear on which timeline you're currently collapsing. Most people skip this step because they don't want to face reality. But you can't navigate to a new destination if you don't know your starting coordinates. I did this exercise 3 years ago, and seeing it all written out was like turning on the lights in a dark room. Now here's where it gets powerful. Phase 3 is about feeling the desired timeline, not visualizing it. There's a huge difference, and most people mess this up. Don't imagine the life you want like you're watching a movie. Instead, drop into your body and feel the emotional frequency of that reality. How does your body feel in that timeline? What sensations run through your chest, your stomach, your limbs? Do this for 10 to 15 minutes daily, preferably right when you wake up or right before sleep. Those are the natural convergence windows we talked about. Your consciousness doesn't respond to pictures, it responds to frequency, and frequency is felt, not seen. Phase 4 requires both surrender and action, which sounds contradictory but isn't. Make 2 lists. What you need to let go of, identities, relationships, habits that anchor you to the old timeline, and one daily action that would be natural in the new timeline. If in the new reality you're a writer, write 500 words today, not to become a writer, but because in that timeline you already are one. You're not trying to get there, you're acting from there. When I started doing this, I began treating myself like the version of me that had already made the jump, and reality started rearranging itself to match that frequency within weeks. Phase 5 is the deep navigation practice, and this one's intense. Lie down somewhere quiet. Relax every muscle in your body until you feel like you're floating. Now visualize yourself in an infinite black space. Nothing around you, just pure void. Around you, see multiple screens or windows, each one showing a different version of your life. Pick one that resonates with where you want to be. Don't force it, let it call to you. Now, with full conscious awareness, step into that screen. Feel yourself inside that reality. Look around. Notice the details. Feel the emotions. Sense the quality of that existence. Stay there for as long as feels right, then step back into the void. Do this for 20 minutes. You're training your consciousness to navigate between timelines like changing channels on a TV. Phase 6 is critical, and most people completely ignore it: grounding and integration. After intense practices, you need to anchor yourself back into physical reality. Eat something, walk barefoot on the ground, touch solid objects, splash cold water on your face. You don't want to dissociate from your body. You want to navigate between realities while still being fully present in this one. That's the balance between transcendence and embodiment, and it's what separates conscious navigators from people who just drift off into spiritual bypassing. I learned this the hard way after feeling spacey and ungrounded for days, until I realized I needed to honor the physical as much as the quantum. So what actually happens when you start applying this protocol consistently? What changes, what shifts, what becomes possible that wasn't before? Let me show you what's waiting on the other side of this practice. Let's talk about what actually happens when you start applying this consistently, because the results are measurable and honestly, they'll challenge everything you thought was possible. First, there's this phenomenon I call quantum acceleration. Things that should take years start happening in weeks. And no, this isn't generic law of attraction nonsense where you just think positive and hope for the best. This is physics. When you align your frequency with a specific timeline, events that already happened in that reality start collapsing into your present experience. You're not manifesting from scratch. You're tuning into a station where it's already playing. I've watched people land dream jobs, meet ideal partners, and resolve decade-old problems in less than a month once they learn to navigate consciously. Here's a story that still blows my mind. I met someone who'd struggled with crippling social anxiety for over 20 years. Couldn't speak in groups, avoided any public situation, lived like a prisoner in their own life. They learned to navigate timelines and consciously jumped to a version of themselves that never developed that fear. 2 months later, 2 months, they were speaking at conferences in front of hundreds of people with zero anxiety. They didn't heal the trauma through years of therapy. They accessed a parallel self where that trauma never took root and embodied that frequency. The old pattern just dissolved, because they were no longer vibrating at the frequency where it existed. Then there's what happens with relationships, and this one's fascinating. When you start navigating consciously, you begin attracting people who are on the same timeline frequency as you. Old relationships fall away, not through drama or conflict, but through natural incompatibility. Meanwhile, new people start appearing seemingly out of nowhere, and the connection is instant, deep, almost like you've known them forever. That's because in other timelines, maybe you have. You're meeting souls who are navigating the same quantum space, and when your frequencies align, reality brings you together. It's not coincidence, it's consciousness recognizing itself across parallel realities. But here's the most profound shift, and it's something you'll only understand once you experience it. Life stops feeling like a constant struggle and starts feeling like flow. Not because everything becomes easy or perfect and challenges still exist, but because you're finally in a timeline where your gifts, your purpose, and your obstacles actually make sense. You're not fighting against the current anymore. You're swimming with it. Every difficulty becomes a teacher. Every setback becomes a redirection, and every win feels aligned with who you actually are at the deepest level. That sense of being in the right place becomes your default state, and it changes absolutely everything about how you move through reality. When you navigate consciously, you're not just changing your external circumstances. You're fundamentally transforming your relationship with existence itself. You realize you're not a victim of reality, you're a co-creator of it. And that realization is the most powerful frequency shift of all. Here's the truth you need to internalize before you leave. You are never just one person living one linear life. You are a field of infinite possibilities, a quantum consciousness navigating multiple timelines simultaneously. What you learned here isn't a technique to practice. It's a revelation about what you've always been. The question was never, who am I? The real question is, which version of me do I choose to collapse into right now? This isn't about escaping reality. This is about exploring the totality of reality. You're not rejecting this timeline. You're stepping into your power as a conscious navigator of all timelines. And here's what most people don't realize. Every person who wakes up to this stabilizes the frequency for our entire species. You're not alone in this shift. You're pioneering a completely new way of existing, and your consciousness is contributing to a collective awakening that's rippling across all realities. So let me ask you, are you ready to stop being a passenger? Are you ready to navigate? Then take action right now. Go to the comments and write, I am consciousness navigating between convergent timelines. I choose to collapse the line of my highest potential. This isn't just an affirmation, it's energetic anchoring in the quantum field. If you made it this far, this content is aligned with your frequency. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, not for the algorithm, but as a commitment to keep expanding. And don't miss the next video appearing on your screen. When the universe confirms that you collapsed the quantum frequency, it might be the confirmation you've been asking for. See you there.